Okay, I feel like stuff like this is easier for me personally to explain if I'm just doing it, and like, I don't know, there's character limits and shit on Twitter, so it's easier to just explain it this way. But I would say, like, very basically for digital line art, one thing I would keep in mind is one, when it comes to stabilization, I personally, like you can see here, I only have my stabilization up like halfway. Now you could change it depending on how steady your hand is, but I personally don't really like having the stabilization up all the way because I feel like it limits, like, I don't know, it makes things go really slow in terms of my liner, and I'm the type of person who likes to make my strokes pretty fast. I think making your strokes really fast and intentional makes your liner end up looking better anyways, and it makes it look less, like, stiff. So that's something to keep in mind. Yeah, I think the best thing also, like, besides, like, keeping your stabilization, like, I think, like, around half. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less. It just depends on, how it feels for you. Would work. That's a good place to start. Another thing that you can do, or that I would keep in mind, is, like I said, uh, the speed of how you're drawing. Because again, really fast, like, confident line art, I feel like looks, it looks a lot less stiff at the end of the day, in my opinion, but I mean, you know, to each their own. I know there's people who do, like, more, like, vector styled art who have, like, very, like, clean and very, like, slow line art processes. And, you know, that's fine if that's how you want to draw. This is just kind of how, for me personally, I find, is the best. I could go on, like, a whole, like, tangent of, like, line weight. That's, like, a whole other discussion that is probably far too long to put in a quick video. Um, but I guess the most basic rule of thumb is, like, I don't know. I think, and again, this is something that can vary a lot depending on your art style as well. But uh, sorry, it's really hard to think and draw on the fly sometimes. My brain gets all flustered. But shit, what was I saying? In terms of line weight, right? I think the best thing to keep in mind is, like, the general rule of thumb is, like, lines that are more like, uh, I think the general rule is, like, lines that are closer to the viewer should be bigger and lines that are further away aren't. I usually use the line weight to, like, emphasize specific forms and things, if that makes any sense. Like, here I have the nose, like, the outside of the nose bigger, and then something like the mouth smaller, just kind of to uh highlight that shape a little bit more, I guess. I don't know. Line weight isn't something that I don't like, that there's, like, an exact science for me for, and again, it's gonna heavily depend on, like, your art style, but, like, I think it's something to keep in mind because personally I think art with a little bit of line weight can, I don't know, it looks nicer to me. I think a little bit of line weight is good to have in your art. A little bit of variation in your lines helps it look less like you've traced something, and it makes it look a little bit more intentional. Not that art without line weight is traced, just, like, just, you know, sometimes that's like that's like something that traced line art can have, is like a lack of line weight. I don't know. A lot of these things are going to be up to stylistic preference. Like, the types of brushes and things that you use are completely up to your own preference in terms of your art style and what you personally like in your art. Personally, I like something that has a good, like, variety of pressure where, like, I can very quickly make it bigger or smaller, like this, depending on my own, like, the pressure I am applying with my hand. so that when the lines are larger, that's fully intentional on my part, or like when they're smaller, that's fully intentional. I don't know. I like having control of the weight of the lines, but again, this will vary a lot depending on how you draw and like what your personal style is. Another thing that I would keep in mind is I don't know if every art program has this, but Clip Studio, which is what I use, has vector layers. And the vector layers on Clip can be really useful because you can do something like, let's say for example, like I'll just make a vector layer. I can do something like, I'm trying to think of a good example. Like I can do something like this. Oh, this is a really bad example. And then I can take the eraser and I can just boop, boop, and then it's like a clean line. That's a good way, like if you're trying, like I think it's a good way if you're struggling with like a really long straight line. Making your lines intersect a little bit can be a really good way to like get that like really solid clean stroke, if that makes any sense. I don't know if any of this makes any sense. I'm fucking rambling. I'm not really good at explanations or anything, but I guess those are just a few things to keep in mind. I don't know. Again, a lot of things are going to vary just based on your own personal art style and like your own personal preference. This is just kind of how I do things. Another thing I will say is don't stress yourself out too much about like how perfect your lines are or anything, because I feel like if you stress too much about your lines being clean, for one thing, your line art is probably going to end up really stiff. It's going to make your drawing look really stiff if you hyper focus on specifically it being clean. I think when you do, and again, going back to like those really, really clean, really, really slow like vector lines, I feel like those drawings tend to be a little stiffer at the end of the day. Which, I mean, again, if that's your art style and like you're leaning into something like, I know a lot of MLP artists, especially like back in the day, would do like very vectory style illustrations similar to the show. If that's what you're going for, if you're going for something like that, then you can completely ignore what I'm saying. But if you're not, then I would highly recommend not sitting here and like being really meticulous over your line art. I think when it is something that like you're just like, it's clean, of course, like you don't want to be sloppy about it, but you don't want to sit and like you don't want to sit and like fester over the little details, you know. I guess that's the best way to put it. That's the best way to say it. Um oh my god, it's been 8 minutes. I've been rambling for a really long time. Other than that, I mean, I think another thing that's again, going back to line weight, sometimes I don't change my brush size, sometimes I do. It really depends. I'm the type who like I want to change my brush size as little as possible, which is silly, but that's just kind of how I do things. But yeah, I'm trying to think of like any other like really basic things off the top of my head that would be helpful, but I can't really think of much. But you know, if anybody has any other additional questions or things that I can attempt to answer, I can try. I'm just not the greatest at explaining my process and how I do things, but I'm willing to try. I don't mind answering questions. I don't know if this specific format is the best way to do it, considering I am now going to have to chop this down and figure out somewhere to upload it. But you know, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, you know. But yeah, yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that. And look at that, I finished this liner in that time that I was explaining all that. I finished this. Wow, that's crazy.